Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 99. Now, we have a great episode lined up today. We have a very special guest with us, Mr. Paul Bassett from Health and Health.
It's never my fault. Nothing's my fault. Blame other people. But then again, you see, somehow Wednesday should have been Thursday, and it turns out that Thursday isn't Wednesday. So that's left me completely out of sync with the world. Hence,
Thursday is the new Wednesday.
Or yesterday. I'm thinking what's happening tomorrow?
For those of you who don't know, who didn't listen to last week's episode with Mr. Fabio Zonin, Paul was absent. He got his days mixed up, so he wasn't on the podcast, but he is with us today. So we have Mr. Peter Lant. How are you doing, Peter?
I'm all right. I've missed one episode, I think, out of the 99 so far, and that was because I was ill. That was the first Dave Whitley one. I remember it, and I was in bed all day, and it was horrible. But I'm quite proud of that. You know, that's not a bad.
There's no prizes.
In fact, assuming I make it for next week's, that's a 99% record. I'll take that.
Yeah, that's very, very good attendance. Very good attendance.
But then,
we're keeping it.
But then that's because I do bugger all for the rest of the day, isn't it? So I get out of bed, do the podcast, and then go back to bed again.
Don't you shout at dogs?
Yeah, I did that today as well. I'm a bit energy low this week, shall we say? But there you go. It's the way it goes, isn't it? Happens to us all. I don't know why. I just am.
Just add 3-year-olds into the mix.
No. That wouldn't work today.
And how are you doing, Mr. Paul Bassett?
I'm all right. I mean, I feel like you haven't been asked the question yet. Are you trying to hide something? Are you trying to move the questions onto me? How are you?
It's difficult to ask myself a question. I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm excellent.
Talking a third person.
I think I've only missed one as well, which was when I was on the way up to a course one day. I was on the way up to certification or something at some stage.
So is everyone rubbing in the fact that I've missed?
Well, I don't know how many you've missed. You've probably only missed 1 or 2, haven't you?
I think I missed there's about 3 in total, I think.
Oh, okay. 3.
Yeah.
Still not
but
bad.
Did the listenership go down on those? Is that what you're noticing?
I think it went up. I don't know.
Right.
Dear me. Anyway.
Is that why you're telling me the wrong days then?
We have a spreadsheet, mate, and you know this.
Well,
Let's not do this in public. Come on, let's not do this in public. Dear me. It's like the other week when we had we had an apology in public, didn't we? The other week. Yeah.
You're triggering me.
Anyway, no, I'm exceptionally good. I had my ice tub delivered today, which I've now got set up in the back garden, and I've had my inaugural dunk. I went in there earlier, and I'll probably go back in there a bit later on today. Actually, it was actually very, very nice. So
and we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? What temperature does it go down to?
It can go down as low as 2 degrees.
2 degrees. And your client said ice. If you drill a hole in the ice
and you go
cut a hole in the ice and swim under that, that's about 5 degrees, right?
It's usually about 5, yeah. So it can go very, 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 very cold.
So supposedly if it goes to like 2 degrees, it'll turn into like some sort of soup. You know what I mean? Like because it'll start to go ice. You know what I mean?
Because it's got like a filter. The water is circulating, so it goes out and comes back in and gets cooled and it filters. So it probably wouldn't. But I know what you mean. It could almost be like a slush puppy, I suppose.
Yeah, because you've got to have a transition, haven't you? So you could just lie on the top of it.
Yeah. Well, the idea will be to use it year round, because by the winter I should be hardened to it. It should be part of my part of my routine by then.
What you need to be careful of with that, though, is I remember when I used to go to Canada and they had hot tubs and stuff like that out in the back. So it was freezing in the winter. I put my towel on the hook. And then I went to get my towel off and I touched the hook with my finger. it nearly stuck to it. I pulled it off quickly enough. But if I'd left it for another couple of seconds longer, I would have lost the end of my finger, like the skin off it. Because it just stuck immediately, this metal hook.
So is the warning you're trying to give is wear shorts?
Well, there's not really metal attached. It's made of wood. It's a wooden, it's like a proper old-fashioned barrel-looking thing. So yeah. Dear me. Anyway, enough of this. What we're going to be talking about today, guys, is some reflections really on the last 99 or the previous 98 episodes, as we're episode 99 today. Talk about some of the themes that have, I suppose, risen to the top for us, at the top of our consciousness, in terms of some of the guests that we've had on, some of the subjects that we've discussed, and then a kind of an overarching or similar theme that kind of joins all of those together. And we had a little bit of a discussion before pressing record about what that might be, but we're going to have that kind of discussion live as we go today. And just before we go further, I will tell you that next week, episode 100, we have Mr. Dan John joining us for his 5th episode, which will be episode 100, which will mean that he has, well, the maths isn't too difficult. He will have been on 5% of our shows.
Well done, James. Well done.
He will be on 5% of our shows.
If you're not watching the videos, James didn't use his fingers or a calculator or anything. He kept his shoes and socks on and all of that. Well done.
Didn't use the abacus. No.
Your eyes did roll to the back of your head.
Yeah. So Dan will have been on for 5% of the show. So we are with Mr. Dan John, very special guest for episode 100. So
he's almost been on here as many times as me.
He's got a better attendance record than Paul. Anyway, I think Paul, we've given Paul enough of a ribbing today. So what do you think, guys? What potential episodes or themes do you think have stood out most for you? And have we, because some things that we kind of go and we come back to time and time again, and we reinforce things, and we maybe reinforce things with different guests, but we reinforce similar themes. What are some of the big ones for you?
Well, for me, I mean, we were talking about this before we started, weren't we? And I said, for me, like we all said as well, didn't we, last week? Not last week, the week before, Ainsley, and reversing type 2 diabetes is huge. You know, that's a huge deal. And then during that episode, I think I mentioned it as well. I can't remember, but that got me to immediately think of the menopause episode we did with Helen. Because these are big subjects that people don't necessarily know a lot about, or don't know a lot about, and probably should, because considering what you put a stat out, was it 11% of the population or 10% of the population?
Yeah, I think it was yeah, one in 10 adults in the UK over 40 have got type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
And in the States, the stat was 11.3, I think, percent of the total population has type 2 diabetes, you know.
And I remember reading or hearing something, this was a few years ago, and I don't know how far true it'll be, but I can imagine it's a big figure, but it was like 11 billion or something was spent by the NHS managing type 2 diabetes, not trying to overcome it and all that, just managing the symptoms of it in people. So, which is a huge amount of, it's not necessarily wasted money, is it? But it's money that, you know, if everybody didn't have it, or the people who didn't need to have it, like Ainsley say, didn't have it, then, you know, that money could go somewhere else. But not saying that that's, you know, that everyone has to do that and all that, you know, it's people have lifestyle choices and that's the way it goes. But I just thought that was quite interesting. But those are the episodes that the two biggest for me, I think. But then from that, we went back to like Tracy Rifkin losing a load of weight and turning her life like on its head, upside down, from being obese to being like the swing queen, and Chris Saremba as well. And, those are the episodes that stick out for me as real life examples of what all, which is interesting. And we didn't talk about this before, which is what all of the other episodes lead up to, go for a walk, eat well, eat a calorie deficit if you want to lose weight, do some strength training, get some sleep, water, walking, like we said, and all of that. All of those things and all of those principles that come out of all of the other episodes were demonstrated by the people in these episodes who turned their lives upside down, basically, who turned like completely overhauled their lifestyles and got the results. So, it turns out that what we're talking about works, which is quite nice.
I think the thing is that we all learn best, don't we, from stories, from stories, and throughout human sort of evolution and civilization, stories have been told and passed down. And I think that sometimes when you actually hear stories from real people that actually back up and solidify the kind of the theory and the points that we talk about, it's so much more powerful when you hear about it from a regular person and someone who has used it in their own life and made it happen. And I think I've mentioned this on another podcast, I'm sure, was the Dr. Chatterjee one, where he was talking about community medicine and people actually learning to have a better lifestyle through kind of group interaction. And having like a group of people who maybe all have type 2 diabetes, having a weekly meeting together, and not in the presence of a doctor, not in the presence of a trained expert, if you like, but in the presence of maybe other people who have had type 2 diabetes and managed to reverse it. So that you're then, it's the AA, the Alcoholics Anonymous kind of model of having a sponsor or having a mentor who's been there and done that and got the t-shirt, and then they actually share their wisdom and a support, encouragement, accountability, all of that sort of thing is so powerful. And one of the things they said in that podcast was, if you've got some kind of disease or challenge or issue or problem, the most powerful thing you can do is find someone who has had that challenge themselves and they've overcome it. And I think when we do episodes with, people talking about their own experiences, it then gives, hopefully, the listener a frame of reference and a kind of a grid point to think, well, actually, this person's been where I am and they did A, B, C, and D, and now they're there. Maybe I can do the same thing. So I think that's why it's so powerful.
I think it's great for getting rid of excuses as well. And I'm gonna say that because that can be a harsh thing to say to someone. You're just making excuses and all this sort of stuff. Because you'll get single mums and dads and all these people with no time, people who've got 3 jobs and and all that, like, oh, it's easy for them and it's easy for you because you're a trainer and not for me because of this and blah, blah. But if you show them someone who's in a similar position who thought the same at the time as well, but actually then just said, nah, sorry, I'm going to do it. Because Ainsley said, didn't he? He said, if you'd have told him it was going to take him a year, he was going to have to walk every day for 2 hours. He was going to have to eat this and that. And he was going to have to eat broccoli and blah, blah. And why he was like, oh, I wouldn't have done it. He just did day 1. And then he did day 2. And then he did day 3, which is that's like the 12-step thing as well, isn't it? You wake up every day and it's a new day. And your addiction or whatever is coming at you. So you've got to overcome it that day and the next day and the next day and just take each day as it comes. And I think having a real life example of that, and like you say, these community things are great as well. Like having a real life example of someone who's like, do you know what? I thought exactly the same as you. And here's why I was getting in my own way. And here's the thoughts that came up. And then here's what I did about it. And then people can relate to that. rather than someone like us who've never been anywhere near type 2 diabetes might say, well, you just eat better. And they'll go, yeah, but you don't know because you haven't had it. You haven't been there, have you? So it's like, it's hard to then get a point across, isn't it? I suppose some people will listen, but other people are like, no, I don't agree, or that's not me. So then if they can see that it is them, they'll be like, right, okay, hang on, I'm getting in my own way now. So yeah. What about you, Paul?
I mean, ironically, I wish I had a picture of me looking awful. Because
hang on. Just a screenshot for
Well, I was waiting for that. I walked into that one.
You did.
Yeah. But during my 20s, late 20s, when I put on a ton of weight, and I probably was on the border of pre-diabetic, I think, probably looking back, I just didn't let anyone take photos of me. So having that kind of social proof, there's a couple of photos I found of me just looking really chubby, but they're just like in clubs and stuff like that. It's powerful to have those stories, isn't it? It's powerful because now when I turn around to people, I say, look, oh yeah, I know knee pain. I could barely walk when I was like 28. I couldn't sit down without being in excruciating pain. People don't believe me, because I'm quite far removed from it now. And so it's all just anecdotal. So it's for me, it's quite good to almost by proxy kind of interview these people who've been through these big changes, because a lot of what I'm telling people is the things that work. But what these people have done really well is that they haven't tried to do everything. If you listen to each of their individual stories, they've latched onto one or two things and trusted them and seen where they can go with them. Whether it's Chris Remember just going, I'll just start to walk. I'm just going to walk. I'm going to make every opportunity I can to do some walking. I'm going to put it into my diary and walk on a treadmill. I'm going to walk to work. I'm going to do this. And then that, because he was consistent, led him down a path. I mean, on my own journey, the changes I made led me down a path, and each point along that journey, I discovered something new. And I think with these podcasts and interviewing these people, every single one of them has maybe started in a similar place, maybe overweight or injured or whatever, or unhappy with where they are. I mean, take what's his name, kettlebell instructor who recently had the operation. Where's my brain gone?
Oh, Jeff Sokol.
Jeff Sokol, been on his own journey with his mental health, and his mental health journey has also opened up doors and opportunities, despite it being crippling at times for him. And each one of the guests we've interviewed has had a different. It's like they've stopped at a different station each time. But that to use the analogy, the train they're on is kept going. It's getting them closer and closer to their destination. But each time they get off, each of them are testing a different flavor. They're finding a different perspective. And I think that's what's great looking back over those 99 episodes, whether it's Jeff, whether it's Chris Saremba, whether or not it's Ainsley or Helen or Maggie, for example. All of them have had a unique perspective and a unique stop-off point and a unique journey. But it's a great expression of what it is when you really do take some of these basic principles, not all of them, but some of them, and really walk with them and really run with them and really try them out. Because I think we're not telling people to do everything, because you can't. As you said, you can just get overwhelmed. I mean, I sat down with someone today and I could just see, as I was doing the consultation, that whilst in his head he was seeing like, oh my God, this can work, he was also getting really scared. He's suddenly realizing, oh my God, I'm gonna have to give up this, I'm gonna have to do this, I'm a creature of habit, my life's been like this for 20 years, blah, blah, blah. And he's starting to talk himself out of it. And he actually almost just walked away. And I was like, all right, okay, I've got to track this back. I've got to track this back and just tell him what his minimum commitment is. Okay, all you need to do is show up on these classes. We're going to do 2 a week. That's it. I don't care about your diet. I don't care about this. Let's just get you in, making some moves. And I think that's what all these guests did. They found that minimum commitment and they built upon that.
I think all of them as well. Just when you were going through there, I was thinking Ainsley had his doctor like coaching him, basically. He gave him those 9 things to do. So that was kind of like a coach to say, here's what to do that, here's a framework. Helen went to the instead of going to her doctor, she went to the clinic instead, the menopause clinic, where there was more like experts there, and they coached her through it. And they were like, look, we'll, about HRT and stuff like that, and how, people thought it was linked to breast cancer and all that. And they were like, don't worry, that's been proven wrong. So stick with us and we'll help you, and we'll find the right formula, and then Tracy, that was a challenge from work, and she was, so all of our colleagues were involved in it, and she was like, right, I'm going to win this. And she's obviously a bit of a competitive lady. And then Chris's doctor.
I was going to say Chris Saremba. Yeah, he had the doctor who first.
His doctor, and then he had a trainer in the States, didn't he? Who he met.
Yeah.
Who basically gave him a framework 15 years ago, or whatever it was, 14, 15 years ago, that he still uses now. So, like you say, but if you look at everybody, they're all different. Chris became not a bodybuilder, what do you call it? Like a physique beach body guy. Tracy became the kettlebell swing queen. Ainsley's doing CrossFit. Who else did we mention? Helen does kettlebells and stuff like that, but she's got hold of her symptoms and what have you. So yeah, they all sought help from the relevant people, basically. Which is another big thing of like not being able to do it on your own, and finding someone who can guide you, basically. I
think as well, one of the things that, just as we've been talking about this, is one of the big, I suppose, overarching themes with all these people is this sort of two things really. It's personal responsibility when it comes to making that change, and then it's the transformation that kind of has come after that, and some kind of massive, I suppose, like a paradigm shift that's caused people to actually change their lives quite significantly. And even if we mentioned Maggie a minute ago, and Maggie was like a chronic calorie counter and weigher and measurer, and calories in, calories out, kind of what's the phrase they use for it is a kind of an eating disorder, but I can't remember the exact phrase, but where you're tracking things so specifically that you're literally making sure.
Obsessive.
What's that?
Obsessive compulsive.
Yeah, but there's a specific thing around the actual notion of the way you deal with calories. I can't remember it exactly, but where you'll say, oh well, I've burnt off this much, so I can eat this much. I've burnt off this much, so I can eat this much. And she was in that kind of pattern and flow, and so she had a massive kind of change and a paradigm shift around that. Jim Hatcher, we mentioned earlier as well, who's in his 80s now, and I know he's just moved into like assisted living. I saw with him and his wife, in near Chicago, aren't they? But the way that he kind of had to change his life when he retired, and obviously the big change that's just happened now. I think the most important thing for everyone to realize, and for us to realize ourselves, is that where we are today is not necessarily any indication at all of where we will be in 5 or 10 years time if we choose to do something different. Because I look back at my career and look back at how I was coaching people, say 20 years ago, and 15 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, and now. And for me, I can almost see that every 5 years of my life, I have some kind of leap forwards, or not necessarily even forwards, but a leap into a different kind of way of doing things, or a different way of looking at things. And I think that's really, really healthy, actually, because I think it's like Muhammad Ali said something like, if you think the same now as you did 10 years ago, you've wasted the last 10 years of your life. Along those lines. I'm badly butchering a quote, I'm sure. But you should be a different person 10 years in the future than you are now, and we all are, I think. And by speaking to these people every week, I learn and I grow and I develop, and I have areas of understanding open up, and areas that I want to look more deeply at, you know, and I'm sure the same for you two guys as well.
Yeah,
Totally. I'd say we're all different people from when we started this podcast. I spoke to Ben Morris about this once, actually, because I speak to him on WhatsApp quite a lot. Don't tell Finn, because he's Finn's client. But I speak to him, you know, we speak to each other on WhatsApp. He basically sends me messages saying that was a great episode, and I'm like, oh, thanks, mate. And then we'll have a conversation. But we were talking about that because I first met him like 3 years ago, more than that. You know, and we hadn't seen each other until I met him after the podcast a few months ago. We hadn't seen each other for like 3 years. You know, and he'd said in the WhatsApp, like when I was speaking to him on WhatsApp before that, he goes, "We'll be different. We're different people now to what we were when we spoke to each other 3 years ago." You know, because he learns and moves on and all that, and you know, and like you've just said, that's kind of what we talk about doing as well. You know, just like you have conversations with people, you read books, you take things away from them and you go, right, how can I apply that? So it's like the courses we talk about, we've all done similar sorts of stuff. And you go away for like a weekend, 3 or 4 days. Sometimes, you know, there's some of the ones I've done have been like 4 days here, 5 days extra here, 4 days over here. So like a load of learning over the entire course, but kind of like over a period of a year or so or more. But you don't need everything from them. You take the bits that apply to you, and I take different bits to apply to myself to the other bits that might apply to the guys who come along to me, because depending on what stage they are in the process of either changing their lifestyle or just you know, trying to add things into the lifestyle basically, or take certain things out. So I've forgotten what I was talking about now, but yeah, it's changing who you are, but you know, there could be some things that you think that's not going to be for me, but you go along anyway. And then you get, if you come away with one thing, that's enough, isn't it? That's great. You're done. You're like, right.
It is enough, but trying to get people into the mindset to think about things in that way is often difficult. Yeah. I think a lot of people want a lot quite quickly because we're kind of conditioned to see that, like, you know, and marketing is part of that, you know, and we all have to market our businesses. We all, I mean, I'm sure all of you both of you probably signed up to something like Strong First because you were seeing people get these amazing results and were super strong, and then you would go down that path and you were like, why am I not making gains this quickly or whatever? And it's easy to kind of talk yourself out of it because of the kind of, or sometimes the scale of like what other people are achieving. You know, I mean, I suppose one of the dangers is when you see so many, not dangers, but one of the things that people really struggle with is when you see success, depending on the mindset of the individual, you can either be inspired by it or intimidated by it. And it's not to say that the person who's intimidated by it is a lesser of an intellect or whatever. It's just that it's like, well, I couldn't be that person. You know, I couldn't be that person. You know, oh, Ainsley's, you know, reverses type 2 diabetes. He seems such a chill guy, so cash about it all. And but we don't know what the internal processes are. We don't know what he's struggled with, what questions he's had to confront himself. We had an insight, but we don't know exactly. And I think a lot of people can go, well, I couldn't do that. I'm not the kind of person that can do that. And I suppose I wonder if we could discuss or maybe dispel that idea that the people who succeed are a kind of person that succeeds. You know, someone like Tracy was, you know, you speak to Tracy, she's a very determined individual. You know, I think I asked her when she was there, it's like, have you always been like this? And I think she had a lot of focus in other areas, and then she suddenly applied that focus to herself. Mm-hmm. And obviously that just took her from where she was to where she is now, which is, you know, exceptional at what she does. But I'm sure you guys work with pretty high achieving people. You know, when you look at their careers, or even social lives or family lives, they're pretty high achieving. But they're just not applying that ability to their well-being for whatever reason, you know.
Totally. There's a guy I used to work with years ago who used to be on the phone permanently during work time to garages about his car, or it's like other, like just lots of other things to do with, like, you know, someone who like painted his house or something like that, moaning about, like complaining to them. You know, people who complain about everything and want money off for this and that. And there's people who just like to do that. And I was like, we all used to look at him and say, if he ended up getting made redundant because he didn't do any work. And it was like, if you put all of that energy and all of that time into your job, you'd be amazing. You know what I mean? So there was that sort of thing. And Tracy was an interesting example on that as well, actually, because all of her, she said the colleagues who she was working with were like, well, it's going to be easy for you, this weight loss challenge that we're doing, because your husband is Mark Rifkin and he's a trainer. And she was like, yeah, but I've been married to him for 20 years at the time. I think it was something like that, 10, 15, 20 years or something like that. And she's like, well, it hasn't done me any favors so far, has it? Because obviously, you know, he's just like, well, I love you as you are. So, you know, carry on. If you want my help, ask me, but I'm not going to force it upon you. So,
20-year challenge. I'll see if I can sell that.
Yeah. But definitely, if you can put a lot of energy into one area, even if it's into something like Netflix or something like that, you're like, oh, I can't do that because I spend hours a day watching box sets and all that. It's like, well, put that energy into, because it takes energy to lie there and watch telly. You know, you're invested in it. So put that energy into something else. And then
where do you think tough
see what happens? Even if it's watching, say you watch 5 hours a night, watch 4 hours instead and do something for the other hour. Like, focus on one thing for that other hour and do that for a month and see if you make progress in that thing. But the problem there is you can't just pick something. You've got to find something that you want to improve, don't you?
How much tough love do you have to employ? I mean, how much tough love? Yeah, I mean, like, because there's kind of something. I mean, not everyone responds in the same way to things. You know, I mean, I would get a sense that Chris Zaremba, you know, Tracy, they're pretty no nonsense to themselves when they made that decision. I mean, it was evident that both of them made a very singular decision. Whether it took them a month or 6 months, that once the decision was made, it was a non-negotiable. And they didn't really have an external fact. They didn't have an external individual saying, "Hey, man up, you know, wise up, get on with it." They made very much a personal commitment. When do you guys? I mean, not everyone does that. Not everyone has the capacity, or not everyone has the. Maybe not everyone knows what that would mean without external help. How often do you guys provide that tough love, that snap, that, hey, you got to wise up, you got to sort this out, you've got to. Do you ever use that? Do you think it's viable?
I use it very rarely. It's not something because I ultimately, I think I've seen it before where trainers almost, and I'm not saying this is what you're suggesting, because I know it's not, but I've seen it before where trainers almost, and I'll use the word, I don't know if it's, you know, shame people into losing weight, and you know, put them on the scale every workout, and if they've lost weight, brilliant, full of praise. If they've put weight on, it's chastising, and like you say, it could be called tough love, could be called shaming, whatever. And I see people, I think people do respond to that a lot of the time. If someone is on at you to you know, but I think as soon as you remove that external shaming influence or person who's on at you, if you haven't made that kind of internal change, everything just goes back to normal. Because I've seen that happen loads as well. Where,
but is there a middle ground? Is there a middle ground where?
I think there's honesty, but I would always use more like tactful, caring honesty, but not sugarcoating things. But I do think that I don't really see a place myself for tough love.
So, for example, like, it's a good example. I mean, I suppose an example maybe of a halfway house would be, like, because I run that 12-week program, the Amazing 12, and we have a period of time to do it, a lot of people come to me because they want to see some radical change. And then you sit down, we say, so how's diet this week? What are you doing? How's it going? Oh yeah, well, I did this and I went out and had a few drinks, but I'm back on it now. I have recently been more inclined to say, I think you're probably expecting me to say that's okay, but you're paying me to be a fascist, and I'm telling you that basically, in order to get this result that you think is going to be amazing, you've got to ask yourself a question: why have you done that? You chose to do that. You could have chosen to eat well. You could have chosen to follow the program, which you told me was super important, and you told me was going to get you, and you want that because you've seen the photos, you've seen what other people can achieve, and you want that for yourself. But you're giving yourself a get out clause and saying, I'm going to have that pizza because I was stressed or whatever. And then you're expecting me to approve that. I think that's what I'm playing with that a bit at the moment. It's like, I'm not going to approve it. I'm not going to shame you, but I'm going to put it back to you and say, do you think that was something that's going to take you closer to where you want to go? Because I have an opinion, but, ultimately it's their decision. What did Poliquin say? He said, like, willpower is a myth. You make decisions. It wasn't your willpower that gave way. It was you decided to make a decision to eat that, or decision not to do the exercise or whatever.
I think you need. Yeah, sorry, go on, Pete.
I was going to say my take on this is, so when James said immediately, well, he said there, I'll use it very sparingly. I was about to say the same thing, but he got in first. So, but yeah, using it sparingly. But the way I kind of do it is you can gauge people on a particular day. So if someone's just starting out, obviously I would say not, because they're probably not going to be able to handle it. They're doing something new. They're scared.
Yeah.
I mean, this is painting a picture of it, but it's not necessarily how everyone feels. But most people will be like, or a lot of people will be starting something new. They're scared. They're worried what the family's going to think. They're worried what the friends are going to think. They're not sure what to think. Blah 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 blah. So they're already in it. So the last thing they want is to be told how worthless they are and all of that. Like, you know what I mean? And that's not what it'll be, but that's might be how it'll feel. So you kind of gain the confidence, and then once you can do that, you can then, I would gauge people on the day. It's like how people feel on the day, you know what I mean? Or someone's like, oh, I haven't had much sleep or whatever. So then you're not going to give them a beast, are you? And you might even drop weights down and stuff like that, depending on how they are, and niggles and stuff like that. And the same can go with the mentality, I think. So, if someone turns up and they're full of the joys of spring and they're feeling quite confident in themselves and all that, it might be worth that might be the time to kind of have a conversation. But I think it also depends on what the conversations have been like before. Yes. So if I get one of my guys if they mention something in a session and they'll say something about their belly or something like that, say, right? Go, oh, my belly's getting in the way again. It might just be for that one day. And if they never mention it again, I'm like, right, cool. But if they say it again the next week, or they say, oh, my trousers are getting tight and whatever, I'll let it go a few times. And then after a while, I'll be like, right, do you realize what you've been saying? Do you need help with that? Which I'm obviously there trying to help already. But if they're saying that, they're kind of like, it's you don't. Dave Whitley was talking about this when he said, "Oh, like someone will be like, I'm the kind of person who doesn't do that. That's not me." And it's like, yeah, but you've told yourself that. So if someone's saying something like that, it's in their head quite a lot. So or constantly even. So they're going to be reiterating, "Oh, my belly's too big. My belly's too big. My belly's too big," even if it isn't. You know what I mean? So that's when I'll be like, right. I'll just try and nip it in. I say nip it in the bud. I'll let it go for a little while, and then I'll be like, right, what do you want to do about that? And they'll go, what do you mean? And I'll be like, if you've mentioned it, like, and I'll give them examples because I'll remember as well. I'll be like, you mentioned it last Tuesday. You mentioned it then. Is it playing on your mind? And then we'll have the discussion about it. Because I heard a thing on a podcast today. I listened to actually, and it was about doing the same thing with friendships and saying to friends like, oh, you've done really well. Like if they've done something and they're not happy with it, you'd be like, oh, you've done really well or whatever. But if they're not happy with it, it might not necessarily help you say, no, that's really good, you know. So you can kind of be truthful, or not necessarily tell them what they want to hear, but try and give them help to move forwards in whatever it is. And it was about valuing the friend more than the friendship sort of thing. So if you've got a relationship with someone and what you're going to say puts the relationship in jeopardy, but it's for their best interest, sometimes that can
We're not there to be a friend, are we? I mean, we are friendly, and
it's still a relationship, though. You could easily lose a client by telling them something. But if it's what they need to hear, and that happens, then maybe that's the way it should. It will work, and they might go and find someone else who will help or whatever. But if you think that is going to help them specifically, then it's sometimes a way. I've never taken it that far, I don't think, but you can definitely see it. I mean, I had one guy who used to be able to justify everything as well. He was obese and he never got any sleep and all that. And I used to talk to him about it all the time because he was very matter of fact. So, you know, and I used to talk about it all the time, and he used to just justify everything because he could. And it was, you know, and he ended up leaving, which I was quite glad about in the end, because I couldn't get through to him.
It's difficult, but I think it's different, obviously, for every person. But I think the main thing you have to have, obviously, is good rapport and have empathy for the person you're talking to. And yeah, you know when some people you can be a bit more upfront, a bit more direct when needed, and some people need a little bit more of a gentler approach, don't you? You know, and also if people aren't doing particularly well, they know they're not doing particularly well, and they don't always need to be told they're not doing particularly well, you know. It's just, I suppose that's the kind of the art of it, really, isn't it? It's when you've been doing it a while and you can see how you best can try and help. But also one thing that you have to accept, that we all accept, and most people don't talk about it, is that we can't help everyone, you know. And even people who do come and they want to join, they want to pay their money, they really want to make some change, you can't help everyone. Not everyone is successful, you know. And I think that's the thing about kind of marketing and stuff, like you said earlier, Paul, like people will see like the amazing 12 before and afters and stuff like that, but it's actually not everyone succeeds, you know, and probably the majority of people don't succeed to that degree, you know, to that because, you know, so in
fact, if you can get a higher percentage than other people, then you'll probably, you know, if 30% succeed where the average was 10, then you've got a massively successful program in a way, you know.
Yeah, but I think as trainers and as coaches, we have to kind of almost accept that and just know that we can't help everyone, even people who you really want to try and help. And sometimes you just almost think, well, I've just got to find a different way. I'm not getting through to them, but I can get through to them if I say it differently, or do it differently, or structure it differently, or do this. But sometimes people are just not going to, they're not going to get the result because of, you know, thousands of things that are totally out of your control and that you're never going to happen. So that's kind of a bit of a tough one to swallow but when you do actually swallow that, it's quite liberating. I'm not saying you stop trying, because you'll always try, but you do know that, you know, doesn't make you a bad person or a bad coach or a bad trainer if, you know, someone doesn't get the result they want and they drop off. You know, it's just this
is where you become a different person, though, isn't it? Because you either say, well, I couldn't help that person because of whatever reason, so therefore, you know, the next person who comes in like that, I'll probably realize faster I'll not be able to help. Or you go, why couldn't I help? Is there a way that I can learn how to? You know what I mean? And it might be something that's completely out of your not necessarily expertise, but just out of the way you do things. So you'll be like, well, even if I could learn how to, do I want to learn how to, or can I find someone else who's an expert at that and refer them over? You know, so that's when this is the who are you going to be in 10 years time sort of thing. You can go, right, is that another string I can add to my bow, or is it, or do I have to now go out and find someone who I can put in my network who I can pass someone on to very, very easily and say, here's the person you want to talk to, you know? So there's many different ways of looking at these things. And it's like looking at something as failure or as an opportunity to learn, isn't it?
Oh, I think one of the values that I have is, you know, it was strive to be the best. Now it's strive to be better. And it's always looking to learn and to develop but even you have to accept that, you know, you could be the best personal trainer, the best. I mean, you could be the best of all of these. You could be the best personal trainer, the best physiotherapist, the best psychotherapist, the best dietitian, the best, you know, cognitive behavioral therapist, the best, all these things. And you wouldn't be able to help someone. Do you know what I mean? And you just have to, you know, that's just human nature, you know? So I think once you accept that, you don't, again, it's down to not taking things personally. You don't take someone's success personally, and don't take someone's failure personally, you know, because they did really, really well. It's not really down to you, it's down to them. And you were a guide, you helped them. So don't take the success personally, but don't take the failure personally, you know?
Totally. I was thinking about that today as well, actually. About a guy who joined, this was a guy who joined years ago. And he lost 50 kilos, but he was determined. And I was like, I was actually thinking about it while I was out on the dog walk this morning. And I was like, you know, I've used him for marketing in the past, you know, BKS's Biggest Loser and all this sort of stuff. And then now I'm like, actually, I didn't have to do a lot. He just turned up and he did what everyone else does. He was just more committed, or he was very committed. He wasn't necessarily more, he was very committed. And he got it.
So I think
so I'm like, I mean, I was there for the framework for him to do it in, but he did it. You know what I mean? So it's I've been struggling with that one recently.
But if you hadn't provided a framework that was easy to follow, that was motivating, that was exciting, and that was fulfilling, you know, he may not have been able to put that determination down efficiently.
I know, but we'll never know this. This is the thing, isn't it?
Know. Yeah, I mean, I suppose what one person's easy glide is another person's friction, isn't it? So it's
totally. Because if everyone was like him, you know, I wouldn't need to be speaking to the likes of you two, would I?
I know, yeah.
Because I'd be off.
We'd be getting you on here telling us your golden nugget.
Exactly. You know, if everyone was like that, it would be so easy. You just get them in. 6 months down the line, right? You've lost 50 kilos. Well done. Go and get your picture taken. Next, like that. You know what I mean?
Isn't a sign of a good train? I mean, what I come across a lot is even some of the best people, they have a level of certainty which almost turns me off to a degree.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're too certain, you know, you're not following the kind of enlightenment, the kind of scientific method, are you? You know, one of the things is you have to have doubt. You have to have a kind of scientific doubt. You have to have a kind of, until evidence proves otherwise. You have to have a path that works based on kind of like experiential data. And what's happening is, you know, I have a hypothesis, you know, and then, you know, I can put it out into the world, it gets tested, and then this is the way we do things until something better comes. But there's a lot of people who's like, no, this is the way you do it. This is the way you do it. And I think that's not necessarily great for clients either. I think it can work for certain clients, where clients who love just hyperstructure, you know, almost like religious style structure, that people can respond to that, because it takes away all uncertainty, doesn't it? Particularly in health, where, you know, when I'm sitting in front of people who've tried loads of things that have not worked, and so to have that level of just pure certainty can be a real good marketing tool. But also it kind of worries me if someone is like, oh yeah, this is the only way to do it. This is the best way to do it. Blah 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 blah.
But it goes back to what we said earlier, whereby if you tie yourself rigidly to one way of doing things, then it takes away all possibility or potential for learning and growth. You know, so it's that closed mind, it's that fixed mindset versus the, you know, the open sort of pliable mindset. And I'm very, very, very dubious, suspicious of anyone who uses the phrase, phrases like, always or never, or, this is the best, this is the worst, this is the way you do things. Because I think they've just shut themselves off. And I think it's either a sign of someone who's quite new and latched onto something that they want to be the truth or the way, or it's someone who may be doing it for marketing purposes, like you say. But I think anyone who's really, there's always, anyone with any experience of life knows that there's always more than one way to skin a cat, you know what I mean? And there's many, many different ways that will get you the same result. So,
how many dead cats are unique results?
Do they?
That's a question to answer.
Yeah. And there was something else that you'd said earlier that made me think about something. That was it, because the guy who you said, Pete, who lost the 50 kilos, and it went back to a question that Paul asked near the start, where he said, is it a particular type of person who gets these results? And some people think, well, I'm not that type of person. Whereas I think that the skill and what we need to try and do is break it down to like steps or a recipe or actions or small actions that help people to get somewhere, whereby it's like Ainsley said the other week, the first thing he did was, I'm going to walk every day, and it's just what's the smallest action that you can take daily and build it into becoming a habit that's going to have a quantifiable improvement over the long term, and I think that it's not a specific type of person who will succeed, but you need to look at people who succeed and then maybe try and reverse engineer what they did and the steps that they took, because everyone is capable of succeeding in whatever, even if someone has become like massively overweight, they've been incredibly successful at putting on weight, and how have they done it? They've been consistent over a long period of time doing the same sort of things every day. It's not so they can be very, very successful at putting on weight. So they can be very, very successful in losing weight. They've just got to look at the small things they've got to do every day to take them in the other direction,
It's funny actually, because this is what made me think about this morning. And So this guy, Paul, had lost 50 kilos. So he was carrying around 50 kilos with him of excess body fat, basically. So I was like, imagine saying to someone, here's a 50 kilo weight, carry that around with you every day, right? They're going to be like, I'm not going to do that. That'd be really hard. And it's like, well, just do it. And the likelihood is, right, I mean, let's say not 50 kilos, but you're going to get stronger just carrying a weight around, right? Your likelihood is it'll get easier day by day, based on how much you weigh and stuff like that. But if you're overweight, obviously it's all the hormonal changes and the fact that it's on you and it's all over your body, and you've got this excess body fat, and it'll do things to you, the way you breathe and all of that sort of stuff. As opposed to if you just gave it to a person and just said, carry that weight around. And that's what made me think, because 50 kilos is a lot. So if you gave that to someone and said, carry that around with you all day, it's going to break them. But people do it without, not without knowing it or without thinking about it, but people do it all day, every day anyway.
But it's just like the Milo's thing, isn't it, though? Because what's happened is if you gave someone 1 kilo to carry today, and then in 3 weeks you gave them another kilo, and then in 3 weeks you gave them another kilo, gradually they build up to 50 kilos, but they're increasing it so gradually that their body's adapting at the same time. Because the people,
that's true. I was thinking, like, how does it equate to that? But you're right, because you don't put 50 kilos on him overnight.
No. If you
imagine that you wake up in the morning like, how the hell did that happen?
Yes, if you put on 2 kilos a month, but you just gradually added that, it's the same thing. Your body, and some of the strongest people that I know are former morbidly obese people who've lost loads of weight, and they are super strong because they've.
I was just thinking that what a
around...
motivation. I've never thought of it that way before. What a motivation to say to someone, you're carrying more than most people can pick up daily. So imagine how strong you'll be. Yeah.
Because we've got guys who started at 30 plus stone who are now, maybe in the teens stone wise, and one's maybe even about 12, I think, maybe. But they're so strong on things like squats and deadlifts because their legs are just like they've been walking around with like you say, with in some cases 50, 60, 70 kilos, Yeah. You take that off and the strength stays in the legs, They're so strong.
Well, 50 kilos is about 400,000 extra calories. So you'd have to consume quite a lot to get that overnight.
Yeah.
I'll give it a go.
Yeah. A couple of Papa John's pizzas with.
The thing is, though, if I put that on, it's not nigh on doubling my weight.
Well, you're one of those trainers that puts the weight on to lose it.
Yeah. I was thinking just before we kind of wrap up, guys, as well. There's a couple of things that just in the course of having this conversation that made me really think as well, like where we've all sort of said that we are different people from the people who started this podcast, 99 episodes ago. And one of the things that I thought, which we have to kind of mention, is obviously that the three of us all now, train with Paul McElroy, don't we?
Yeah.
Which I don't know if anyone, were you working with Paul before we started the podcast, Paul, or not?
I think I just started actually.
Just around the same time.
Yeah, in the lockdown. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I just started before lockdown.
So certainly Pete and myself started sort of during the course of this podcast, and you potentially at the start of the podcast, so that's obviously had a big change on all three of us as well in terms of our own training, our own kind of maybe understanding, our own knowledge around training, working on the back of working with him. And then one of the other big things that I've taken from the 99 episodes, I suppose, is the theme of simplicity and simplification, as a big theme with regards to, to training, to lifestyle, to nutrition, to personal productivity, to life in general. I think, simplification and simplicity. And obviously we spoke, Steve Maxwell was a massive proponent of this, but that's been a really big theme that's probably had quite a profound change on me in the last couple of years as well. So yeah, on the back of recording this podcast for 99 episodes, I think it's really, really helped to develop me and to move me forward. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
Yeah. I'm gonna cry.
Oh. No, but it's true, isn't it? But again, you take these things. But if we'd started this is the important thing as well, I suppose, to bring it back to training and people maybe wanting to get stronger, wanting to lose weight, wanting to do anything, is if we'd started the podcast saying, right, we're going to do 100 episodes, it would have been totally overwhelming. But all we do is do one episode a week, and gradually, before you know it, like if you imagine we get to episode 100, and if you think of the same thing of someone who maybe needed to lose 100 pounds in weight, if you just take it a pound at a time and you just work your way down, and it's like the old I think it's Martin Luther King Jr. You don't need to see the full staircase ahead of you, you just need to take one step at a time. Similar. Yep. And again, another butchered quote, I'm sure, but very similar to that. It's we just record one episode at a time, and before you know it, next week we've got Dan John on for episode 100, and we've done 100 episodes, and all the people we've spoke to from all over the world, and all the people connections that we've made. David Keown, for example, coming over and doing the workshop, and we've all met him now, and
we've made so many friends of the show.
Mr. Mace Man, all these people, Steve Cotter,
well, we're saying in a few weeks we've got a guy called Simon coming on, who Kirsten didn't introduce me to. She said, "Hey, just to hit him up." So Kirsten Tulloch, who we had on, So I did, and he agreed within, like, we had a conversation on Facebook Messenger. He didn't have a clue who I was, but I said, Kirsten said, just get in touch. And he was booked in within like half an hour, so it's that's been really interesting as well. That's been a big thing for me that we've found out is you get in touch with people, and the majority, we've had a handful of people who've said no out of however many guests we've had on. But most people have said yes, most people, because they want to get because they're genuinely interested in this, and they genuinely want to help people and get their message across, which is great.
Yeah, you think about people like Phil Maffetone, who he had on, Stu McGill, Fabio, Brett Jones, all these, world-class authorities that we've had on to spend time with. Yeah, it's just been fantastic. It's been really good. Right, final thoughts before we wrap up. Mr. Paul Bassett, anything you'd like to say?
No, I think I've spoken quite enough. But yeah, no, it has been a pleasure over the last couple of years, which seems like a long time. Seems like a long time, but it's been actually really, really fun. When I look back, it's just like, great, I've got a chance to geek out on all these things, because otherwise I'm just geeking out on my own, reading people's books or whatever, and chance to meet a lot of these fantastic, interesting guests has been excellent.
No, it's great. Mr. Peter Lant, any final thought?
Not really. I was just going to say thank you to all the listeners, to you guys, because it's, that's why we do it, isn't it? It's just been, it's like you say, doing an episode a week, and just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and then it becomes the well-oiled machine that it is right now.
Sorry, my 3-year-old
as Paul's feeding his son some more juice.
Anyway, right, guys, thank you so much. Thank you to Peter. Thank you to Paul. Thank you to all of our guests up to this point, our first 99 episodes. We are back next week with Dan John for episode 100. Thank you, obviously, to all of you for listening and for watching. Please do like, share, subscribe. If you're listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, please do leave a review. If you'd like to join the Facebook group, just go on groups on Facebook and search Health Oddity and click on to join that, and we will let you in. It really is a pleasure for us each and every week doing this podcast, and yeah, we just love it when we see other people obviously listening and sharing and putting things on Instagram and messaging us on Facebook and that sort of thing. It's really, really great, and we will continue lining up guests as we go forwards. But next week, as I said, episode 100, big landmark episode with a big landmark kind of guy, Dan John, back with us for episode 100. So until next week, thank you for listening, and we'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com, or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Oddity.